How did this shy kid who just wanted to talk about sports for a living sue the Walt Disney Company and ESPN to stand up for freedom of speech and First Amendment rights? I don't know how that happened.
God.
100% God.
When you do the right thing, you suddenly have more hours in the day. It's really unbelievable.
The reason I filed the damn lawsuit is because I want these companies to know that we will no longer accept it.
Do you think America is a racist country? Is it?
I get so mad when people say that. You can be a girl today, a boy tomorrow, and a cat on Thursday, right? That's fine. But I couldn't be a conservative with my gender and my skin color. Too many people feel scared to death of their companies. I get it, but just know that you are not alone.
Sage Steele, let's have the conversation we had in the green room right here in front of the whole world.
Buckle up.
Buckle up. So for those who are living under a rock and don't know about your story, I want to just get right into it. And I actually think it's going to be so fascinating to walk through your story now, several years later, where you can really talk about everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's another little Sage Steele somewhere out there who is probably going through what you have gone through and has no guidance, has little courage, and doesn't really have a role model to follow to know that things will be okay. And boy, you are okay.
I'm okay.
You are okay. And so I want the little Sage Steele, and I'm sure they're both women and men, to hear what you went through and how you came out of it an absolute warrior.
Oh, gosh. First of all, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. Conversations are what life is about for me today. And it's always what it's been like, but I was never really allowed to. And you work on a live news show. I was on Sportscenter for all those years, and it's like, you gotta go, 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 go. And so it's been awesome to be able to do it on my own show and to be able to do this with you. I never thought I'd be allowed to. This is a big deal, to be able to actually talk, forget about cameras and just go. I ended up, it's so crazy. How did this shy kid, believe it or not, and I still feel that way sometimes, I get shy and I have to flip the switch. How did this shy kid who just wanted to talk about sports for a living and tell stories of great athletes and their why sue the Walt Disney Company and ESPN to stand up for her freedom of speech and First Amendment rights? I don't know how that happened.
God.
100% God. I am learning now the why. And I think that's been really important in the last, I've been gone from ESPN for 15, 16 months after 16 and a half years there, which was my ultimate dream when I was a little girl to work there. And I did it. I did it at the highest level. And I'm literally so grateful for every moment there. I wouldn't change any of it. But I thought just innocently, gave my opinion on the COVID vaccine mandate. Not the vaccine itself, but being forced to get the shot to keep my job. This is in September, October of 2021. So it's been 3 years since I said what I said and then got punished for it.
What was the punishment when you said, first of all, what did you say exactly? I'm sure you've memorized it by now.
I kind of have. I was on a podcast with Jay Cutler, for the non-sports fans out there, the former Bears and Broncos quarterback who had retired and started a new podcast. And his publicist had said, hey, he's done 2 shows. He wants to have a woman. Come on with Jay. I was like, sure. I talked about him a lot on Sportscenter, did a bunch of highlights or lowlights of his. And sure, I'll come on. Seems like a nice guy. And he was prepared. He did his homework on things that I had spoken about in the past that maybe weren't a big deal then, but were more so in 2021. And I had literally just come from getting the vaccine that I had to get to keep my job. And I was devastated that I was forced to do something to my body that I didn't want to. And so I was running hot. And in hindsight, I literally came from getting the shot that I cried during to running home, flip up my laptop and open it up and get on a Zoom, and I had a short sleeve shirt on with a Band-Aid on my shoulder and literally didn't even really realize it because I was in a rush. He's like, what's that Band-Aid?
Oh, he asked you during the show.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
What's the Band-Aid for?
Well, I got my shot today. I didn't want to do it. I work for a company that mandates it, and I had until September 30th to get it done or I'm out. I respect everyone's decision. I really do. Yeah. But to mandate it is sick.
And then what?
I was like, I just kind of laughed because I thought, I was hot. I was angry. I was pissed off that I had been forced to do this. And so I was like, well, I just came back from getting my shot that I had to get to keep my job. And I said, I think it's sick and scary for any employer, and mine happens to be Disney, to force somebody to do something to their body that they don't want. But I have a job that I love and a job that I need, frankly. And I had no choice, and I'm complying. That's what I said, sick and scary about the Disney mandate. And so when the podcast hit the first week of October 2021, I started to get texts and phone calls from bosses and my agent at the time. And, my boss, who was second in command at ESPN at the time, was like, did you get permission to do this? I'm like, no. I mean, no one gets permission. Stephen A. Smith does 800 podcasts and shows a day.
Permission to talk about your body?
Permission to do a podcast, any interview without asking them first.
Oh, okay.
You have to ask to breathe there.
Yes.
And that was part of the official rules, but none of us really followed them. I was on a podcast with a former quarterback. I worked at ESPN. It made sense, but we talked about social issues. Other people were allowed to do whatever they wanted, and I didn't even think about it because everybody just did their thing. And it got big quickly. And basically it was that I had criticized my employer and I wasn't allowed to do that. And so the punishment, to answer your question, was to, first of all, publicly apologize. I had to issue a written statement, which they then followed up with a statement of their own. So I was apologizing for criticizing the company. I couldn't say the word Disney. I could not say Disney. I had to say the company. That was a mandate. And then I apologized for putting them in a tough position, I guess, by talking about the shot. And then they followed up with a statement of, well, while we respect everyone's opinions,
we don't respect
we
your
don't,
opinions.
and we're going to shut her down. And so I got suspended. They don't like to use that word, but it was suspended with pay, but suspended, taken off the air for almost 2 weeks. And, at that time, I would have been content, I guess, with just that. The problem is the punishment continued and assignments were taken away from me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to publicly apologize. I think this is wrong, but I'm going to do it because I was scared. And I was told that if I don't apologize, then I will be fired. So of course, as I'm divorced and I'm 100% financially responsible for everyone in my family, even the one I'm not married to anymore. Like the pressure was immense and I was scared to death.
Yeah, and it's your dream job too,
dream
right?
job.
I'm sure
I loved it.
You worked your butt to get
my
there.
Butt off for all those years, 30 years. And so, but the thought of being fired, it was real. And I said, okay, I'll do whatever it takes. Issued the apology, even though I disagreed on it, and then sat out for 12 days, whatever it was. And then came back to work and was told, how many people hated me and I need to call certain members of my team and coworkers to apologize for other things I had said too in that podcast about women being more responsible for what we wear in professional settings. And that's just my opinion and my experience working in men's locker rooms for 25 years. So that's the reason why everybody hated me at the company, according to bosses. And then, of course, being defiant by speaking out against the company, even though I followed their shot policy. So when they kept taking assignments away, though, that's where it broke me because I'd worked years to earn them and to host the Rose Parade in Pasadena every January, or to host the New York City Marathon, or some of the pieces I've been working on for my new streaming show that were incredible pieces of human interest with athletes who opened up and shared their stories in tears with me. And I was so honored. And then they stopped promoting it. And that is when I couldn't believe it. The reason I sued, though, is because I thought that was unfair, willing to overlook it, when I saw them allowing my peers, fellow on-air teammates, to speak their mind about social political issues, not just privately or on separate podcasts, but on ESPN airwaves, to talk about Roe versus Wade being overturned on an NBA show, or having a moment of silence for the alleged don't say gay rules in Florida during women's college basketball tournament.
Which was never said in the bill.
Never. If they took the time to read it and do their homework, people would have probably still made up the lie because it worked and they'd get away with it. But it's one thing to do it on the side, which is what I did. I thought that was okay, to give my opinion on a shot that I complied with. It's another thing to say these things on ESPN airwaves, on a sports channel that has nothing to do with Roe versus Wade or Don't Say Gay. The hypocrisy of that is what made me say enough and call an attorney, my attorney, who's such a dear friend now, Brian Friedman, who has saved a lot of us who have been, canceled by our networks. And I'll say that to make that decision to pull the trigger and file a lawsuit was one of the scariest moments of my life. But I knew I had to, because I'd been silent and scared for so long. And I knew that enough was enough.
Where do you get those inner voices from? There's this thing that we say as educators that the things that are spoken to you when you're a child become your inner voices when you become a grown-up. And oftentimes they're the things that are going to build you or give you courage.
My faith has grown so much over the last, I'd say, 6 years. On a personal level, when I had to make the decision to leave my marriage, and I've been married for 20 years, almost to the day, 27 years total. First boyfriend I ever had.
Wow.
That's all I knew. 3 beautiful kids. So in order to get there, I had to dive deep on my faith, even though it was a scary decision. Obviously, I'm Catholic, you don't do that. And I'm not a quitter. So you don't get divorced. So that happened to be much more important than the professional stuff. But when I had dug deep on my faith with that and talked to my priest and talked to people I really trusted, and then I learned to trust myself and those voices that I know for me were spiritual. I'm like, if I could get through that, then I can do this. And so I need to continue to dive deeper. And I really felt like I got so many signs in both situations, personally and professionally, to make the decisions that I made. I also remember being on the floor, literally, because when I got suspended for speaking up primarily about the vaccine mandate, I'm sitting at home, and I then got really, 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 really sick with COVID. The thing that the shot was supposed to prevent me from getting, I was literally on the verge of driving myself to the hospital. I was not good. And then these headlines kept coming out about, all the people were making up lies to become part of the story of how terrible of a person I am. And one headline in particular just got me and broke me for some reason. I was on the ground because I didn't have the energy to get back up. And my parents had driven up from Pennsylvania because they knew I was scared and alone and sick. And they shouldn't have come. My dad has 2 kinds of cancer, and this is 2021 and COVID, and you're not supposed to be around. And it's proof that when, as parents, we do whatever it takes. And so they came and got their 50-year-old daughter up off the floor and was like, you're not going to let this break you. So my parents, who've been through so much just to, survive as an interracial couple in the early 1970s, so much bigger than what I've been through, when I saw them walk in and help me, and then thinking about what they'd been through, and finally thinking about the prayer that my dad had just drilled into us as kids, I knew I had to do this. And that prayer, he's a 1970 West Point graduate. And as kids, I have 2 younger brothers. He made us memorize part of the cadet prayer. And that part is, help me to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and to never be content with a half truth when the whole truth can be won. So the harder right, I was so annoyed that I knew what the harder right was. Because I knew I couldn't be silent, no more. I've been silent my whole life. And so afraid to stand up, afraid for good reason. Look what happened when I was just being myself. God forbid. You can be yourself in every other way. You can be a girl today, a boy tomorrow, and a cat on Thursday, right? That's fine. But I couldn't be a conservative with, I guess, my gender and my skin color. So I knew what the harder right was. And that the second half of that prayer, I could never be content if I was only telling the half truth, because the whole truth was right here. So that stupid prayer that he made me memorize,
stupid prayers,
came Like it was right before my eyes. And I preached that to my kids too. So if I didn't follow that at my lowest, most vulnerable point, when my little sports world was watching and laughing because I'd been silenced, which is what they wanted, then shame on me, and I'm a hypocrite. So that faith that came with all the things, and in particular that prayer that had gotten me through so much when I was thinking about getting divorced, then I knew I would have to forever be quiet, and I could not do that.
There is something that you said that keeps ringing in my head, and that was you made a comment while you were working for ESPN about how women were supposed to focus more on what they wear than what they say. And they get upset that you said that, yet they wanted to control you and make sure that you don't say what they don't want you to say.
You're right.
So how did your colleagues and friends from 20 plus years of work react to you speaking out?
The silence was deafening.
They didn't call you in secret and say, Sage, we're behind you.
No.
We get it.
No.
We're sorry. We're sorry this is happening to you. We can't say anything publicly, but we're going to put a big hat on and come and support you. There wasn't even support behind the scenes.
No. I will admit that part is still hard, especially some of the young women who came after me at ESPN. And, I'd been there a few years, and it was important to me to welcome them because I had not felt welcomed when I started in 2007, a different era completely altogether. And I had gone to bat for some of those women when they were going through some things or just had questions. And so for them I never expected anybody to publicly support me because I know what comes with that. That is scary, and it could be career suicide. So I never expected that. It was the human level. It was just that human part of just we're friends, and just you see that I'm broken right now. Just reach out and and so to not have that part, that changed me, hardened me for a little bit. And now I'm glad because, gosh, my circle is a lot smaller and healthier. And I needed that because it was probably too big because I've always been I just try to do too much. I'm still working on that, but such a pleaser in every way. And I wanted to make sure these other young women didn't feel the way I did coming in as a young mother. When I started at ESPN, my kids were 11 months old, 2 and 4. And this is in 2007. This is, it was still very much a boys' club. And then the women who were there were not the nicest, that's for damn sure. So I just never wanted others to feel that way. And then before I knew it, I was one of the veterans. And so I was like, let me help them. And then I went to bat for a lot of them. And then silence. I would never change it, though. I will continue to go to bat for any young woman or man because I know what it feels like when no one does that for you when you need it. When you're not asking for something, but you're just scared because this is an ugly industry, So I promise you I have no regrets. There's no bitterness at all from those women who chose to stay silent, and men. My best friends were men, silent. But that's because they're afraid. And I know that it takes a lot to push through that fear. So I respect it. But I'm like, okay, onward then, And I'm glad. And it also taught me how few people do have strength. And again, I get it, but I know now that I need to be around like-minded people, not necessarily people who are going to go, drop bombs and sue their company, especially when you're still working there, which is another thing that was kind of crazy and unique about my situation. But I can't handle weakness. I can't.
It's the other thing is being around real people who want to live a real life. And so there are two components to that. One is these people are not real. They're not authentic. The friendship is not real and authentic because when my friends hurt, I hurt. But the other part of it is that they are not living a real life. I mean, they're controlled. They can't say what they know. They have to live in fear. And that must be very heavy for them as well.
I know it is because it was for me. And I felt like I didn't have a choice for a long time either because of the financial obligations I told you.
Well, they'll give you the lollipop and just take it away. And so you're like, give it back to me. And they're like, well, we'll give it back to you if right?
It
And
is the golden
that's-
handcuffs in many
yeah.
ways. And especially when this is your childhood dream and you've worked your whole life, and it takes a long time. It used to take a long time to
Yeah.
really build to get there, especially once you achieve that childhood dream. Like, are you going to throw it away over this or that? So I understand more than anyone. But at the end of the day, for a while, and even with my decision to take the vaccine, to get the shot, which I still really struggle with, I felt like I caved. I really am. I've forgiven myself because I had to do what I had to do at that moment to survive 3 years ago. A very different time than now, certainly. And companies have stopped. It's magic, right? How all of a sudden,
Right.
nobody's forcing it and it just goes away. Like, I want to,
And by the way, those who are on the other side of it, do not look at you with this thing that you need to carry some sort of shame, right? Like
No.
everybody should just make their own decision.
That's all we wanted. That's all I said to my
That's
company.
it. Make your own decision. And if you made the decision and you changed your mind, that's okay too.
It is. It was more for me, such a principled person
Yeah.
in so many ways. But again, there's fear. And I
It's
literally
very
didn't know
hard.
what I was going to do. So
No
when people
judgment.
say, and thank you, and I'm better now, it's been 3 years, but when people say to me, you had a choice and you chose to do it. They're right. I did make that choice, which is why I understand the fear. But I also know this. It will eat you up. The fear will eat you up. And the silencing, at least in my experience, it'll eat you up. And that's kind of what it did. So when I made the decision to speak up, I threw it all away.
Mm-hmm.
I had an incredible contract at ESPN. And a, relatively speaking in that way, easy life with a good schedule, high pressure, a lot of stress, all the things, but like I did throw it all away. And I did not have an idea where my next paycheck was coming from. And I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
So I get the fear thing, but
Yes.
I also am like, okay, that's on you then, because there will never be a perfect time to take that leap and to really take a chance on yourself and just go for it. And without my faith, full circle, without my faith, I would never have been able to do it. And I have seen, Marissa, that like the more I have let go of control, especially in the last 6 months, the beautiful things that are happening are insane. And I am so grateful. I get emotional. I live down in South Florida now, and I sold my house in Connecticut and sold everything in it, like literally everything, put some stuff in storage and got in my little car and drove 23 hours down here to start a new life by myself. And it was scary, but I shudder at the thought of what had happened if I had stayed comfortable and stayed fearful. And with good reason to stay comfortable and to just keep it all perfect. Never a good time. And I'm so passionate now about sharing that and how you can push through fear, even when you're responsible for an entire family. And I'm so grateful. What if I hadn't? And then I'm preaching to my kids to take chances and to believe in themselves. And then I'm going to sit quiet. Total hypocrite. So now I'm just winging it, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is such an amazing feeling to feel free, right? It's worth more than any money. I mean, you read the Bible, the Old Testament, you talk about leaving your Egypt, right? That was your Egypt. Right?
Oh my
In
gosh.
Egypt, things were comfortable, and there was food, and you know what's going to happen tomorrow. But then when you have the courage to get over it and just keep going
Yes.
and listen to God
Listen to God.
and tap into yourself, that is really the meaning of everything. We were chatting earlier where I told you I don't work out enough and I don't eat that healthy and what do I think sustains me? Well, one is sleep, because I think it's really important, but more than anything, I think it's meaning. Meaning is my medicine. And I think that when you are able to live a free life, you can truly live a meaningful life, because you can tap into what God really wants you to do. And I really do believe that you're on the journey to do what you're meant to do. I've been watching what you've been doing over the last few months, the last few years, and just the transformation that has happened in your personal life and in your career is so worth sharing. And before we walked in here, I just, in full disclosure, I kind of encouraged you to speak about what happened several years ago. And you were like, oh, well, what
At
happened with
ESPN,
ESPN? It was a long time ago, and I've been on so many shows, and I've talked about this, and people may know about it anyway. It's a thing of the past. And, my point is, no, it is not a thing of the past. What you went through a few years ago, people are going through every day right now. And also, the way you look at what you've gone through a few years ago will be viewed by you a little differently now, because you have been touched in so many ways. Your heart has expanded, your mind has expanded, your visibility has expanded, that the new perspective that you have now about what you went through a few years ago is a whole nother level.
You're right. And I needed that encouragement from you. My fear and continuing to speak about it has literally only been because my fear of being perceived as, oh, she wants sympathy, or woe is me. And and that's why I'm like, no, that's not me. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
And, I literally just don't want anyone else to live in fear for so long.
Yeah.
And the reason I filed the damn lawsuit is because I want these companies to know that we will no longer accept it, because that's what they bank on.
Yeah.
And it's worked. It's worked incredibly well to just do what they said to me. Like, be quiet, say this, do this, sign this, or else. And there's a reason for us to listen, but absolutely not. And the strength that has come from that. I mean, I will say I think that's probably, when I look back on the experience itself, from the moment I got suspended to the moment I settled with ESPN Disney, with 22 months. So once I got back from suspension, I was on the air for 22 months, 16 months with an active lawsuit against the very company whose
and
TV
you had
I
to
was
go
on
in there every day.
Every day. Every single day. So I think if I look back, because when you're in it, you're just like, oh, that's probably what I'm most proud of, because I felt sick to my stomach every day for 22 months, and especially the 16 months once I filed the lawsuit. And to walk back in there the next day after it had hit that I'm suing Disney, ESPN, like nobody does that. You usually wait to sue somebody after you're gone.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that luxury. It had to be kind of now or never. So I think you would like this, though, because when my parents came and lifted me off the ground, and like all of the day I went back to work, my best friend was there, Tiffany, who was also my makeup artist, who had a lot to fix that day, and every day since. And she was there, and my mom and dad were there. And my dad, who's a former football player at Army, went back to his football mode. He's like, okay, girls, huddle up. And I'm getting ready to walk out the door to drive to work to go back on Sportscenter for the first time. And he, words of encouragement. And then he said, we're going to say a prayer. And it wasn't the cadet prayer, because we already said that 100 times, right? And I'd already, I'm doing the harder right by going back into work and not just running away saying I need some time. It was St. Michael the Archangel. And so for any Christians or Catholics out there, that's a prayer that we say at the end of Mass. And it's basically protecting you, I envisioned it as a protective bubble that that God put around me to be able to walk into any scenario and protect you from the wickedness and snares of the devil. And so from that moment on, when I walked out the door shaking, Tiffany threatening me to not cry because she made my face look much better, to the day I left, I felt protected. And so every day I would drive to work, and they lived in Pennsylvania at the time, my parents. So I'd call them when I pulled into the parking lot, and I'd put my mascara on before I walked in those doors, and we would be on speakerphone and say that prayer to protect me when I walked in. So I felt sick every day, but I walked in there and I did feel like I could do it. I found this strength, and it's crazy because I feel like 16 and a half years there, those last 22 months, I did my best work. Like I feel like, because I've always been super critical of my work, especially, 2 hours of live TV every day is a lot. I felt so calm and so strong, and I trusted my instincts even more doing the live stuff and the interviews and winging it with highlights.
You're like, God's with you.
Oh my gosh. The more people came at me, the more calm I felt and the better I did. I didn't realize it in the moment, but I look back now and I'm like, how the heck did I go in there knowing that like Bob Iger and everybody literally was trying to crush me and bleed me dry financially with this stupid lawsuit? So I wouldn't change a thing And that's why I can't shut up about it, because too many people feel scared to death of their companies based on the pressures, to raise a family or stay alive, medical bills to pay. I get it, but just know that you are not alone. There are millions of people out there who have felt scared like I did and just stayed quiet. And that's what they bank on. And if we continue to do that, then I think it's on us. At some point, that's on me if I choose to stay silent. So I got to help make people not be silent and realize we're in this together. And the more we speak up, the more they will realize they don't have the strength they think that they do. Yeah. We are powerful and we have to use it.
Well, I'm really glad that you're willing to go back into this again. And I also think that one of the things I want people to truly understand is that when you do the right thing and when you do God's work, you suddenly have more hours in the day. You suddenly have more superpowers. It's really unbelievable. It's when you don't tap into who you are and connect truly with what you're meant to do that you're depleted, that you don't have enough hours in the day, that you're fearful, that you can't do things. But the moment you let go of those, what did you call it? Golden handcuffs? Yeah. You actually become what you're meant to do. And then you can do almost anything. It is so amazing. Like every time we take on a new program at PragerU, I'm like, I'm already so busy. How is it possible that we can do one more thing? Yeah. But if it's the right thing for us to do, somehow more hours in the day show up. It's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah. And the people that you are surrounded by too, that show up,
will show up for you.
The right ones.
The right people will show up for you. I think about some of the things that I go through raising my kids now. They're 11, 9, and 6. And I today have luxuries that I didn't have as a child. And I think not having luxuries was actually helpful in me being the tough chick that I am. And I'm doing some research about your childhood and just you describing your childhood, being an army brat, having to move around the country, having to make new friends, being a shy kid and having to get over it. These really, really hard things that you went through as a child. Do you feel like they've prepared you better for what you were meant to do later on in life? Because we're so scared to put our kids through hard things. And we so want to helicopter over them. But then they get this big hit in real life and they're not prepared.
Right.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about your childhood and how you think those hard times built you. Because you're built.
I was, and I did and do have the best parents who dragged me through a lot of things, obviously professionally, but growing up, by the time I was 11, I lived in 4 different countries. But what a beautiful experience, I think, when I look back on true diversity. That's how we lived. And to be the new kid a lot in your elementary, junior high, or high school classrooms. If you wanted to play on the kickball team, you had to go up and say hi. And then I think in some ways, it's the most diverse upbringing, but also the most sheltered, because military kids are cool because they get it. They know what it's like to be the new kid, and they're very welcoming, and understanding. And it's you want to be on the team?
Oh, it's a big family, the military.
Right? Big family, and a beautifully diverse family, because I'm from, my dad's Black, my mom's white, and there was just so much, interracial dating and marriages. Everybody was all blended and beautiful. That's what the world looks like, and that's what the military is,
It's e pluribus unum. It's what we're meant to be.
It is. And so that's all I knew. And so getting out of the military environment was actually a little bit shocking when I went to had to move across the country senior year of high school. That was the worst, to a place that was the opposite of diverse. And I very much stood out like a sore thumb. And then college, et cetera, and then this industry. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not... So I was so spoiled. I was so sheltered despite being so worldly and living across the world because of how welcoming everybody was. So, every time was hard to move because you got used to it and you made friends. And then my mother in particular was awesome with this because the moves are hardest, I think, on the spouses. And certainly the dependents, but the spouses more so. And when the father or mother goes, off or just deployed or something, who's home with the kids and trying to adjust and find new doctors and dentists and getting kids signed up for soccer every couple of years to a place you've never even heard of sometimes. And my mom always said, no matter where we live, there's always something great. We lived in really cool places like Greece and Belgium growing up. I was born in Panama and California and also lived in the middle of Indiana, middle of nowhere in Kansas. And every place we loved, because my mom taught us, you got to just go find the good. It's all there. And you're always going to meet great people. So I'm super grateful for that perspective that she chose to have growing up very differently from my father, who was also an Army brat. But my mom grew up in small town Massachusetts, never leaving the state ever, and then being disowned by her parents for marrying a Black man. Like, my mom is tough, despite being so sheltered in her own life. So I just thought it was normal to move around and have to make friends, even though I was shy. And so that's why TV wasn't that difficult for me to adjust to when you had to start from in a really small market and keep moving and being the new kid and being the weird one or whatever else. It was preparing me. And I just didn't know it. So I'm grateful for that. But of course you don't know it until afterwards and what it does take to walk into those classrooms, or the sports teams when, you don't move at the beginning of the year quite often. You move in February. So I had to build that toughness to walk in. And then, okay, that allows me to do a lot of things I've done today, even where I have to say, okay, it's hard to walk into this restaurant by myself and sit at the bar by myself and get a nice steak dinner by myself. And I do think back to being that
everybody
kid
walks
sometimes.
in and just hits on you. That's what happens.
I wish. That's not what's happening. I'm at the wrong restaurants, apparently.
Everybody's going to be DMing me. Set me up.
Oh, gosh. No, we'll talk later. But it does still, I go back to being that little shy girl. But then I realized, remember when you walked into that first day of your senior year of high school? I didn't know a soul in that whole school of 2,000 students. And I was the only Black student, the only one in the whole school.
How was that?
Not fun. I think a lot of the kids were great. There were a couple that were not.
Racist.
And made it very clear. Definitely the toughest experience of my life up to that point for things that kids said. Racist, ugly things that were said and done that I had never experienced in my life until I was a senior in high school because of the beautiful, accepting, tolerant, diverse world I was in as a military kid. So I didn't realize there was that kind of racism until I was a senior in high school. But it was preparing me for what was to come. And I had no idea. And I'm grateful for that time too.
You know how you lived all over the world, you lived all over the country, you really know America.
I do.
Do you think America is a racist country? Are we institutionally racist? I feel like especially somebody like you who's not only lived all over the place, but you're half Black, half white. If there's anybody who can answer that question, it would be you.
I get so mad when people say that. The institutional systemic racism, all these basically new phrases that are just, now everybody says it because it seems like it's acceptable and tolerant and cool. I have literally lived across this country and across the world. Yeah. And having lived in other countries, I can look at ours and say, stop, guys, that's not what this is. Now, will there always be racism and prejudice? Of course. Until the end of time. There always has been and there always will be.
Humans will always be assholes.
Yes, it's called human beings. And whether we want to admit it or not, we all have some prejudices in us. I know what mine are. I'm working on it, But stop looking for perfection when there's no such thing. And be forgiving and understanding. I'm not saying accepting and tolerant of ugliness and racism. But quite often, when I go back to what my mom went through to be here today, and my parents just celebrated 53 years of marriage. My mom and dad had to forgive my mom's parents for their racist behavior, to disown my mother because of who she chose to love. So the forgiveness came in understanding their why, because I believe that everybody's opinions are based on their experiences. So I don't know exactly what my grandparents experienced, but I know that where they were from, they just didn't see people like my dad. And then, this is long before media and internet was even in existence, really. But if all they knew was what they saw on the news in the 60s and 70s and what Black people were about, and it's coming off the civil rights era in a very different time, well, then you're going to have some stereotypes, and vice versa, that all white people are racist and hate Black people. Like, it goes both ways. So for my mom and dad to forgive my mom's parents and then allow that recovery to happen 6 or 7 years later, that taught me a lot about forgiveness. If anyone is bored, like I've kept this pinned on my Twitter X account for 6 or 7 years. And NFL Films did a piece on my parents based on my brother who works with the Baltimore Ravens, and he's in the NFL. And interviewing him, they discovered this beautiful story of my parents, and it's forever pinned there because it tells the story of what my parents went through to get to today. And this was done in 2016, so it's old now, but it still applies. Like, my crap is nothing compared to that, which is why I think I've been able to maintain perspective because of what they chose to go through to be together. And if they can forgive and persevere, who am I not to? And to just realize that people say ugly things and do ugly things. And even talking about, a little bit ago about my friends at ESPN or in the media world who went dark on me and kind of just forgot about those years of friendship. Like, to forgive them because I don't know what they've been through to make them do that caused them to do that. So you got to forgive and realize that everybody has a why as to why they're behaving a certain way or not being there for you.
You would forgive them if the ESPN friends suddenly called you now that President Trump got elected and you're part of the new cool team and they suddenly call you now, you'll forgive them?
Yeah, oh my gosh, who am I not to forgive? Yeah. Doesn't mean that the hurt is not there. Mm-hmm. And I don't forget. That's for sure. The friendship has changed forever. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it would even still exist. But I know the importance of letting someone speak and and allowing someone to grow. I don't expect I'll get those phone calls, and that's okay either way. They know, and they can live with that. And I don't wish ill on any of them, but I know that, again, I just go back to something so much more important to me, which is how my mom forgave her parents for letting go of her. Mm. And I don't know. So I'm humbled all the time by that perspective. And that's why I say screw you to people who want to focus on everything, making everything about race.
Yeah.
I think the part that I struggle with the most today, and probably always have and always will, is, to me, the most racism I have felt is from people who look like me. And that's the part that I'm like, no.
What do you mean? Can you give me some examples?
Well, when people who look like me tell me I'm not Black enough, or call me a coon, and a very long list of things I won't even repeat.
Because
of my views, because, how can I be a Republican or conservative based on the racist Republican Party and the racist Donald Trump and all, like, who cares? That's how I grew up. Right. And I feel like I had the best upbringing because of how diverse it was and still is. Like, my Black family loved me as much as my white family. Like, isn't that what we want in America? That's what America is. That's what we are promoting. So shut up with your divisiveness. It has devastated me the most, though, when Black people have said what they've said. And oh my gosh, it's probably a massive minority of people, but it's a very loud minority. And certainly some of my peers at ESPN and elsewhere. But that's the part, because I think growing up, kids are kids, even good military kids. And so, oh, well, she's this because of her white mom, or she talks like this because of, or her hair, or like all this stupid shit that, like, what are we doing? We're actually being racist by saying these things. So that's the part that I've had to let go of, and realizing that this is how God made me. And if I'm not black enough all of a sudden, or I'm no longer invited to the cookout because of who loved me and who I loved, or how I believe, then you're the one with the problem. And you're the one that's actually being a detriment to this beautiful country by continuing to focus on race, whether it's those people, whether it's these people at these colleges and universities, or just on Twitter, who are choosing to benefit from this. That's why the Joy Reids of the world continue to do what they're doing, because they'd have to take a hit in their paychecks if they stop making things all about race, and they're not willing to do that. So go ahead with your big bad self. Go ahead and do it. Be divisive. I can't imagine what that feels like, to live in such ugliness and to want to divide. So those are the people we need to pray for.
I love that you have that tolerance in you. You know, the work that we do here at PragerU, the whole mission of this enterprise is to change minds. And so we have to come into it knowing that we have to be with arms wide open. People will wake up in different times in their lives, in different stages, and humans make mistakes. And so there is a line which I believe when people cross, we can't forgive. Right?
Probably, and it's probably individual, right?
And, individual, or if we see zero remorse. But when people show remorse, I think we need to welcome them, because at the end of the day, that's our mission. Our mission is to bring people into the light.
And that's what God wants us to do.
At the end of the day, right, we want our children to get along, and God wants us to get along, right? And that's truly our test. And then there are the people who have been truly brainwashed by the Joy Reids of the world, or the MSNBC, who have gone to the vast majority of American colleges, where they've been constantly brainwashed that Donald Trump is an anti-Semite, that he's a racist, that he hates women, that there is no chance that Kamala Harris would be elected, because if Hillary, who is a white woman, didn't get elected, then Kamala Harris, a black woman, could never be elected in the United States of America because she's a black woman. And I think this fear that has been instilled in our culture into young women, it's actually evil to instill this kind of fear into people. And you can't expect them to think differently if they don't actually see some of the light, right? I don't know if you can expect a 20-year-old college student to understand what is really happening, the type of brainwashing that is happening through our, I call our colleges, oftentimes they're left-wing seminaries. That's what they do. You just send them into the washer, and just day in and day out, they're brainwashed. And so I think the element of forgiveness is so important. And then I'm wondering, what message would you have, given the journey that you've been through, to women like that, and men who have been going through the university washers, who have been listening to woke media, who haven't really been given the opportunity to hear the alternative perspective, probably have not gone to church, or they have gone to a woke church. Those exist too. There are many woke synagogues.
Yeah, you're right.
And so if you could speak to them right now, because they are living in fear. They're living in fear. Think about what they are thinking in their mind is about to happen to their country. What would you say to them?
First of all, get off TikTok, or at least expand your horizons a little bit, because we know the influence that the mainstream media has had on all the social media platforms. And they're only allowing these kids to see one point of view. And if that's all I saw, especially at that age, or even now, then I would be fearful as well. I gotta say, I'm proud. My oldest daughter is 22, and she's a senior in college. And, she called me the day of the election and I said, "Are you gonna watch?" And she said, "No, I'm afraid. I'm so afraid that what happened in 2020 is gonna happen again. I can't watch, Mom." Mm-hmm. And she did her own homework on all of it and why she believes what she believes. So Quinn, my firstborn, gives me so much hope because of the conversations she has with her friends and roommates. And that's what it takes. And so for the young women and men, have the conversations, really talk to each other about it. And I also think that when they do that, just like with us, you realize you're not alone. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good kids who come from just normal households that are maybe, middle left, middle right, whatever it is, but common sense. And if you have the conversations, you realize you're not alone. And that's when it can happen, and the magic can really happen. I also don't want these young kids to live in fear like I did for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of my biggest regrets, even though I can't really regret it because I wouldn't be here today without having lived in that fear and feeling it.
You got to go through the hard things.
You do, yes. And if I can, if I can prevent them from, beating themselves up for as many years as I have in every aspect of my life, then this journey is so worth it. Like, if we don't share the crap we've been through, what a waste, you know? So be kinder to yourself. Listen to what's in your gut. Don't ignore it just because you don't hear others talking about it. And speak about it. I think it's the way you say things. It's not your words necessarily. It's how you say them. And so when you begin those conversations, and even in your posts and your tweets and all those things, your comments in the DMs, how do you say it? Lead with kindness, even if it's something opposite of what they're saying. But when you go in, ablaze, of course, they're going to be defensive as well. But most importantly, you cannot live in fear. You will regret it, and it will change your life. And you will look back and regret it. So is the fear legitimate? Yeah, that's what I've been talking about. Absolutely. But it also took me too long to rely on my faith. So when you have that faith, whatever that looks like, just because I grew up, strict Catholic, still practicing, and Christian overall, my mindset on that has very much expanded. Whatever your faith is, where that's rooted, go there, pray about things, and then do you in a kind way. I really believe that would have helped me realize much sooner that it's okay to take that chance, especially if you have a support system that might not be your parents like I had. Maybe it's your roommate. Maybe it's their parents, Maybe it's your rabbi. I don't know. But you're not alone. Please don't think that. Take a chance.
There was something amazing that you did at the beginning of your career, and that was you rejected ESPN the first time around and decided to have a baby and to raise a family. And I think about that because just yesterday I bumped into this young woman. She's probably about the age of your daughter, maybe a few years older. She's married, and she walked up to me and she said, "I am so scared to have children." And I think this is so important because young women have been told to be afraid to have children. One reason on the right is that because the education system is so broken and they're going to hear all these bad ideas and they're going to go on social media and it's so difficult to raise children, which it's not easy, of course. And then another reason on the left is that humans are parasites on planet Earth and that we're mooching off the planet and we need less humans. And, there's the toxic mom culture, which both are really bad because at the end of the day, there is nothing more beautiful and meaningful. There's no better vitamin for your life than having children. And somebody like you who put your career on the line to go and have a family. And what I said to this young woman, I said, listen, I just stood with President Trump and I do incredible work that I'm really proud of and I really enjoy it and really nourishes my soul. But there is nothing more important to me than my children. There's nothing I'm more proud of than having kids. It's what I get to actually really keep to myself.
It's yours.
It's really mine. I mean, you went through a divorce. You don't have the husband. You've changed your career. You don't have ESPN. But look at you. You have your kids.
I have my babies.
You have your babies.
Mm-hmm.
And look, we'll have kerfuffles with our children, especially if they're in their late teenage years. But this message that young women are too afraid to have kids or that they should have their career first because otherwise they won't be able to have kids, or that having kids in this period of scary time in the world is not worth doing, I just think is a message that we have a responsibility to break.
Yeah.
And break it hard.
And I probably don't think about that decision to turn down ESPN enough. This is just what I did in that moment, just what I thought was right. But I look back and I'm like, wow, I took a big chance there too, Yeah. But I was raised in such a beautiful family that I knew that I would regret putting that priority on the back burner for this career. And so I was pregnant with my second when I finally got the call from ESPN, and I was so excited, and I went up to audition, and I mean, I was like 12 months pregnant, like just, whoa, and crushed the audition because I didn't care, because I had this baby bouncing on my bladder, like, let's get this over with, you know? And then I got the call, and I mean, my husband was very supportive of taking the job. He was a stay-at-home dad. My parents knew this little girl that had been talking about ESPN her whole life. I finally did it. Because I'd been talking to them for 4 or 5 years, and they were like, this is what you need to do to get better and to work on it and to be basically worthy of working here. And they were right. And then I got there, and they gave it to me, and I was like, I can't do it. And my agent at the time was like, are you high? Like, what are you doing? ESPN doesn't need you. You need ESPN. And she's like, you're going to get blackballed. They'll never call you back. I just knew I wanted at least 3 kids. And I had a dear, dear friend, Stuart Scott, the late, great Stuart Scott, I miss him every day. He's a legend at ESPN. And died of cancer almost 10 years ago, which I can't believe. And he was the one that pulled me aside when he didn't even know me that well, and said, don't come until you're ready, because this place will eat you up, especially as a young mom. So this is in 2004. And I listened, and I just said, you know what? And I prayed. I'm like, if it's meant to be, then they'll call me back. So I said no, and signed another contract where I was in DC, Baltimore, and had a 3rd kid. And 3 years later, they called back. And it happened to be a better offer too. But I can't imagine what had happened if I had listened to the fear of they don't need you, you need them. Listen to that message. And I probably wouldn't have had a 3rd kid, because when you get to ESPN, like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how I survived the first decade there in the first place with babies, you know? Just as the mother who was trying to be everything at work and national TV, and then the room mom, and for all 3, you can't just do one kid. You got to be the room mom for all 3 kids at the same time, and make the cookies homemade.
Make up for everything.
All of the things. It's ridiculous what we do. My kids, talk about keeping us humble in every way, but perspective. And when the night before my lawsuit dropped and the news of it was dropping, I talked to each kid separately. This is the power of your children. I had a sophomore in high school, a senior in high school, and a freshman in college. And I spoke to each of them separately. And I'm like, listen, this is what's coming down. This is what's going to happen. I don't want you to feel like you have to defend me or stand up for me, but I wanted you to know, because in the past with other things that, stirred the pot, or I'd made headlines with my big mouth, teachers would say something, or coaches or other parents, which pissed me off. And you have an issue, come to me. Don't talk to my kid. And I just said, don't ever defend me. But if someone says something, just remind people that diversity of thought really is the most important thing. And that my mom has a right to her opinion, whatever it is. But just don't feel that pressure, but remind them. And so each kid reacted a little bit differently. And my son, who's in the middle of my daughters, he's 20. I was in tears, and I'm like, I'm just sorry for what's going to happen, because I know it's going to be ugly. And my son stopped what he was doing, and he looked at me and he goes, Mom, it's about time you stood up for yourself. So this is when I need alcohol.
Have some tea.
Okay. But that's so many lessons for me as a parent, right? We're trying to do everything perfectly for them. And I was making myself smaller and not being true to myself to protect them. And the whole time he's watching me. They're watching me being like, God, that's not her. But he never told me that. They never told me until the moment I was going to stand up to one of the biggest companies on the planet. David versus Goliath. Who am I? And so I knew at that moment that even if I lost against big bad Disney and the company that I loved for all those years, ESPN, I was still going to win, because my kids saw that I finally was standing up. I just didn't know that they'd seen all of it. So my kids have saved me in many ways too.
Yeah.
And especially in that moment, I'll never be able to thank my son enough for that moment of making me realize I'm going to be okay no matter what, even if I don't have a paycheck, because at least they see me and respect me. And most importantly, won't wait till they're my age to do it and to be honest and true to themselves and stand up for not just myself, but for others. That's what it was at that point, other people. So don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't wait, young women and men. That's what we're told. And it's so sad because the family is where it's at. And it's so cliche, right? On your deathbed, you're not going to wish you had worked more. But it's true. And my kids have seen a better version of me over the last few years since I did this and made this decision. And their life has changed. And they went through a lot of crap. People attacked my kids online, threatened to rape my daughters because of their mom's opinion. Like the psychos out there. Let's point that out, right? And so there are risks because they're going to come after your kids too. But my kids are tough. And I know that who cares about my accomplishments? And my kids don't, but they care about their mom. And now that they're old enough, they also care about our happiness. They do. And so they inspire me to keep doing it. Most importantly, so they don't wait as long as I did. And now they're seeing a different version. And they're going to be a hell of a lot stronger than I was. And they're not going to live in fear because they know that you're going to survive. So I hope those young women don't wait. You can do both.
Yeah.
And either way, there's going to be sacrifices. If you wait, by the way, I have several friends who are in their early 40s who have struggled and are devastated because of the infertility issues now. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be perfect. I've turned down a ton of great assignments. I've left a lot of money on the table.
So what?
Who cares? Look, and no one gives a crap about you.
Yeah.
In the big picture.
Yeah.
But your kids do.
Your kids are the gift from God.
They are. Now they make me crazy and they're a pain in my ass right now.
That's their job.
But
that's their job. Especially in their teens. That means you have normal, healthy kids that are doing their job.
Oh my gosh.
But they're watching their mom win in life.
They are.
You're going to be part of their inner voices.
And what if I hadn't done it? What if I think about that? What if I had stayed quiet? Can you imagine? I can't imagine if I'd stayed quiet and not allowed them to see. And then their friends see it too. And I'm just so grateful that I dug deep on my faith to find the strength to do it for them. Yeah. And hopefully for other young women and men who are afraid to be true to themselves.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not supposed to cry. I should be over this.
You are just supposed to be who you are. If Sage Steele in her 20s could come back and sit with us today and watch you cry with me about everything you've been through, what would Sage Steele from her 20s say watching you?
I had a feeling you would go here, and I'm still not prepared. I'm
getting you a tissue. Everybody's going to think I'm a bad friend for not giving you a tissue.
It's okay. Okay, we're just going to pretend like this didn't happen. No, I'm fine. This is the other part. We try to be tough.
You're incredibly generous. You know what? You're incredibly generous for being so genuine and so open. Most people put on a front thinking that they can go through all the hard things without being human. And that also is a bad example.
It is.
By the way, it's an unfair example, and we don't need to do that.
Is there any Kleenex stuck to my face?
No. And you're one of those people who are beautiful no matter what.
Love you. Not true. Love you. But
that's very unfair, but
no,
we'll deal with that next time.
I think that you're right though, because we try to, it's been 3 years or it's been 5 years since divorce.
That doesn't hurt anymore. What's your next story to entertain us?
Yeah, it's still there, and that's okay because it's helping me continue to share it and hopefully help others through it.
Yeah.
Like I said, what a waste if we don't share the pain.
Yeah.
But I think you said the word warrior earlier, and I hesitate to use it because it sounds but I think I'm a lot stronger than I thought. And that's kind of cool. Because you can be really emotional and really probably too sensitive in some ways and all those things. And I am not too sensitive, but just very sensitive and very emotional, and still be freaking strong and a badass and not back down. You can be both. You don't have to choose.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of that. I think the message I would have to myself, my 20-year-old self, is to stop living in fear and stop trying to please everybody else but yourself. I'm the ultimate pleaser, and I'm in recovery for that little disease.
Yeah.
Because it is, especially
it's the shy kid oftentimes.
The shy kid, the firstborn. I was the only girl on both sides of my family for like 15 years. I wanted everybody and everything to be perfect. And if they weren't, or if it wasn't, then I was going to be the one to fix it. And it's exhausting. And so I would say, stop trying to please and save the world. Be empathetic. Be that bringer together, or whatever that word is I'm making up right now. Be yourself, because that's who I am. And I'm a nurturer, and I'm a mom, and I care and love so hard. But don't absorb that if it doesn't turn out perfectly for everyone else around you. And I used to absorb it, try to fix it all, and I can't. Empower others to do that, but be okay being you, even if it's uncomfortable and even if it's not popular. And I'm grateful that through my faith and through my parents and a very tight circle of friends and my kiddos that I found it, and now there's no turning back. And it's so exciting. It is so exciting, even though I literally don't know what tomorrow brings personally or professionally. I don't know. And I'm okay with it. So I would hug her too, because she needed a hug and still does a lot. And it's okay to ask for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Marissa, I wouldn't change it. Not one thing. The cancellations, plural, the devastation from being let down by employers or teammates or spouses. I wouldn't change any of it. And I need to keep working on myself to be better for those who are around me and those who aren't around me, because I didn't realize I had this voice. I didn't realize that this sportscaster dream would turn into something where a couple people might care what I have to say. And it wasn't the goal. Sometimes I don't like it. But I do believe that's, besides being a mother, that's why God has me here, is because he knows I'm no longer afraid to speak up for myself and, more importantly, for others.
I'd hope that Sage, from her 20s, if she were to watch you, she would say, wow, God really has a hand on me, and I'm going to be just fine.
Because of him, I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm great.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, my fellow warrior. I love you. And I'm just excited about what you're going to be doing next. I'm sure people are going to follow you. You have your own platform now where you're free to speak.
Yeah, it's weird. I keep thinking
it's amazing.
Bob Iger's going to reach up from behind me and choke me out. And he hasn't shown up yet. And I feel like I could take him if he did.
You would take him down. You would take him down. I have no doubt.
God bless him.
Let's do it.
God bless them all. Thank you. Thank you for wanting to talk to me. I appreciate it.